Hey y'all, welcome to the Casper Pride Guide training. This is creating affirming spaces for the queer community in Casper, and we're so thankful that your business and organization has signed on to do this with us to expand resources and opportunities for the queer community here in Casper. Thank you so much again, and at the end of this, you're going to receive your certificate as well as be listed on our Casper Pride Guide. So if you're ready, we're ready, let's go. Hey y'all, my name is Gage Williams. I'm a social worker here in Casper who's been working with the queer community since 2015. I became the resource director for Casper Pride in 2023, and I'm here to walk us through this journey. I do use he, they pronouns, and any questions, I'm the person you ask, and let's get this going. So let's jump into it. In this training, you're going to learn a lot about the queer community. We're going to learn anything from gender identity, proper pronoun use, sexual orientation. We're going to go over policies. We're going to go over a lot, and it could feel overwhelming. So we have provided some handouts, and you are always welcome to email me any questions that you have. We will go over some frequently asked questions, but I know that there's more because we're human and we got a lot of things to do. So let's start learning. So let's start off easy. What is the Casper Pride Guide? So in a study that we did a few years back, we found that the community was looking for resources. So we need to figure out how to connect the community to those resources. Thus became the Casper Pride Guide, which houses our resources such as yourself, the events that we do not only here in Casper but throughout the state of Wyoming, as well as our trans fund, which is home to a lot of information and resources specifically for the trans community. It's an awesome website. We have physical and digital copies of everything, so it's worth checking out, and actually we're gonna check it out right now. So let's look at the Pride Guide. So you come to our landing page, and this is where it'll get you to all the different aspects of the guide. Scroll on down, or you can use the tabs at the top, but the first one we're going to look at is the events. So the events calendar houses any and all of the queer-related events happening in Casper or throughout Wyoming. So we'll pop into an event here. This will give you the details on when it is, where it is. You can invite people, a little blurb about what it is, and that's how each different event is kind of categorized in here. Then they're color-coded to the event that they are. Next, we'll hop on into the providers. This is where we house our providers. This is expanding always. This is why you're taking this training. So we're going to hop into Casper Women's Care. This will give you a little blurb about what they do, contact information, where they are, how to set up an appointment. Now we'll go back. We'll head on over to the health guide. So the health guide has resources for different aspects. So we're going to hop into tobacco resources. That's the Pride Guide. Like I said, it's ever growing, it's expanding, we're changing up stuff all the time. And let's head on and learn some new stuff. So who is the queer community? Well, the queer community is your family, your neighbors, people at the grocery store. The queer community makes up a big portion. But who does that encompass? So I assume most of you have heard the LGBTQ+ acronym. I personally reference the community as the queer community, but mostly and generally you'll see LGBTQ+. But what does that mean? What is that little plus sign? Well, that little plus sign actually stands for LGBTQIP2SA. And you're probably like, what is that? Well, on the next slide, I'm going to tell you. So over these next couple slides, we're going to go over kind of the vocabulary that comes with working with the queer community. And as you'll find in the resources that we've provided, there's a lot of vocabulary. I'm not going to go over all 5, 6, 7 pages of the vocabulary because it's too much and our whole training would be that. But I am going to go over some of the stuff that comes up most often. So that LGBTQIP2SA, what does that stand for? So you have lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, two-spirit, and asexual. And I know that's a lot. I know there's a lot to go over with that. And you do have the definitions for all those words in that resource that was provided. But one that I do want to go over that comes up a lot in my trainings, the one that you might not be too familiar with, is two-spirit. So two-spirit is what Native American culture uses in order to encompass someone to define someone, that encompasses both masculine and feminine energies. And that is something that comes up a lot in my training, so I definitely like to point that one out. I'm in no way an expert on Native American culture, but that is my base knowledge, and there is the definition there, and if you have more questions, I can point you in the right direction to find those resources. So here we have it, some more vocabulary. Like I said, there is a ton. And if you've had a chance to look at the resource, you can see just how many words the queer community encompasses. That's because the queer community encompasses everybody who is not straight or cisgender. And what do we like to call that? Heteronormative, because that is the society that we found ourselves in. It is that straight, cisgender society, one man, one woman. But we know from just being alive and history as it likes to be that that is not the case. Queer people have been around for ages. The next word I want to talk about is cisgender. So cisgender just means you identify with the sex you were assigned at birth. So you can be queer and cisgender. So that's just one of those words that we like to incorporate just to show people that like we need to expand our knowledge on the words that we use. The next few I want to talk about are the phobias. So we have a lot of phobias within the queer community, and we know that these phobias are not a fear-based thing, they're a bias-based thing. And in order to understand these phobias, we just kind of got to talk about them. So we have homophobia, which is just a general bias against the queer community as a whole. And then we have transphobia, which is a bias against the trans community. And then we have biphobia, which is a bias against the bisexual community. All of these biases can be found throughout the not only straight cisgender community, but also the queer community. And that just comes from a lack of understanding and a lack of compassion for other people. So in order to release our phobias, quote unquote, we have to just have a general understanding and a general compassion and create those affirming spaces. The next two I want to talk about is men who sleep with men and women who sleep with women. So that MSM and that WSW. So these I like to talk about because you're like, wait, if a man's sleeping with a man, doesn't that make him gay? Not always. So we have this subset of the community that is straight identifying, but engages in sexual acts with people of the same sex. And the reason we want to talk about that is, A, we want to just get it out there and understand that like people are people no matter what you do. And so we want to talk about them as well because, you know, men who sleep with men who identify as straight and women who sleep with women who identify as straight, they're engaging in high-risk behavior because they're not using protection, they're not being safe out there. So we want to talk about it so we can let them understand that like there's a high risk of STDs, there's a high risk of, you know, being harmed. So we just want to create the conversation so people feel comfortable letting us know what's going on so we can then connect them to the appropriate resources. Passing is something that's important for individuals within the trans community because they have spent so much time understanding themselves. And now they are affirming themselves by the way that they look. And that's through passing. Like they want to pass as the individual that they have decided and realize that they are. So they just want to pass. So that's why we talk about passing, because it's just so important to some subsets of our community. The last one, or the next one I want to talk about, I got two more, is genderqueer. So genderqueer is just, you know, someone who is outside of that binary of man and woman. Like you're genderqueer. So we've got non-binary and we have genderqueer. So I personally identify as genderqueer because I do like to get a little fancy sometimes. And, you know, men don't really have the fanciest clothes, but also we shouldn't gender clothes. So, you know, but that's a further conversation that's way outside this training. If you want to talk more about gendering clothing, we can, you know, meet up for coffee at some point. The last one I want to talk about is polyamorous. So, like I said, the queer community encompasses everything. And polyamory is a relationship title. So polyamory is where you have more than one partner, which can also be, you know, referred to as non-monogamy or open relationships. So, you know, there's so many ways to be a human, and we're just talking about how basically it's not just being straight and cisgender. So just like everything, there's rules, and especially when it comes to the English language. That's no different from the queer community and the vocabulary that we use. So here's a little bit of like some do's and don'ts that we just kind of want to go over real quick. So as you saw from the giant reference of words and vocabulary that we provided, there's just a lot out there. So with that means that it's changing. So vocabulary ebbs and flows. Like when we find out new stuff, like we create words that help people identify. And people are like, why are there so many words to identify the queer community? It's because we are identifying a person. And our identity is so much a part of us that that's why we need to come up with these words to like match the person's identity so they feel seen and they feel heard. So with that, we have some do's and don'ts and some things that we just need to kind of like change around. So on the don'ts list, like we need to recognize when words are kind of outdated, like the words that we don't use. So the biggest one is hermaphrodite. Like we're not using that word. It has changed to intersex now. It's a more affirming word. And we really want to create those affirming spaces because a lot of these words, just like queer, which we'll talk about later on why I use queer so much, but have kind of changed meanings. But some of these words are just outdated and we don't use them anymore. And a really big one is we don't use the derogatory ones. So if anybody remembers the Hillary Duff commercial from way back in the day about where she was talking about why are we saying that's so gay, you know, it's just like you're messing with someone's identity and you're making it a negative. So we just need to kind of like stray away from those derogatory meanings from these words that, you know, are attached to someone's identity, because you wouldn't want your identity attached to a negative meaning either. So why are we doing it to people in the queer community? And with that, we just need to be cognizant of what we're saying. Like we just need to think about what we're saying. We need to learn how to say what we need to say. You know, I'm here to teach you as much as I can, but it's going to be up to you to go out and put this stuff into practice. And then with that, I'm going to give you some tools. So one of those tools is using inclusive language. So instead of like fireman, firefighter, because we've also grown to where, you know, firefighters can be queer, but firefighters just aren't men. Like there's women firefighters, there's non-binary firefighters. So we just need to like create that inclusive language. So just like mailman, mail carrier. And you know, some of you are working for nonprofits where you've got boards. So instead of chairman, chairperson, or just chair. I mean, it's kind of funny to refer to someone as a chair, but you know, in the right context, everybody knows what we're talking about. So those are kind of like the do's and don'ts of the language. And really it just comes down to learning and creating those affirming spaces. So I think it's raining outside because now we're going to talk about umbrellas. And that's the queer umbrella. So you've heard me say queer probably 1,000 times at this point. And I know some of you are like, ooh, queer. Why are we referring to the community as that? Because this is one of those words that our community is taking back. And queer really encompasses a lot of that community. And I'm not saying LGBTQ plus doesn't, but if you try and say LGBTQ plus 1,000 times like I've said queer today, I'm gonna mess it up and I'm gonna have to take 1,000 takes, and I really just wanna get this over with. Because I know you've got time that you are sharing with me and I don't wanna waste too much of it. So with that, we have the queer umbrella. Hot take, I think everybody's queer, which we're gonna talk about later, but let's talk about why we use queer. So queer is an identifying term for the whole community because on one side, it encompasses the sexualities. So that's lesbian, gay, bisexual. Those are the people, you know, that's who you're sexually attracted to. And then the other one is your gender identity. That's the other side of the umbrella. But they're both under there being protected from the rain. And then if you fall outside of that gender binary, you're like playing in the puddle. That's our non-binary, genderqueer friends that are just hanging out in the puddle, playing in the puddle. So that is the queer umbrella. That's kind of why I use the term. Obviously, you know, you use whichever term feels best for you. And I know some of you are like, well, if I, a straight cisgender person, says queer, is it going to be taken offensive? Mostly no, because it all comes into that context. And remember, we're cognizant about how we're speaking about the community. So as long as you're not saying in a derogatory way, it's totally going to be fine to use the word queer, but you can also keep up with LGBTQ+, or even further, that long acronym, that LGBTQIP2SA. You can totally do that too. So we talked about it earlier. We talked about identity. We talked about, you know, self-discovery. So being a queer individual means that you have to take a hard look at your life. And you're like, am I? Do I? Am I attracted to? Is this the body that was meant for me? You have to do a lot of things. And that comes with a lot of self-reflection. We live in a society that, I'm going to use the term, hates a lot of the queer community. And I mean, not everybody, but there is a strong, very loud subset that does not like the queer community. And so in order to understand if you're queer or not, you got to, you know, weigh those options, look at those risks, and you got to really look at yourself and be like, am I not? So this is something you can do with yourself. We're going to do it together. So this is my little friend. He's the genderbread person. So they fall out of the binary. And this is just, some things that a queer individual has to go through. So the first one we're going to talk about is your identity. That's the squiggly marks up in here, which I know my brain looks like their brain all the time because I'm going 100 miles an hour. So that's our identity. That's who we are. That's who our brain tells us, like, this is who you are. This is how you're going to present yourself. This is how you're going to talk. This is how fast you're going to talk. I'm a fast talker, so I do apologize if that's happened at any moment through this entire training. But that's also my identity telling me that I'm an anxious individual who just needs to get through it, so it's over. But that's it. That's our brain kind of runs the show. Sometimes it's good at it, sometimes it's not, but that's where it comes from. The next is our attraction. That's who we're attracted to. That's who connects to our brain, or like, that person right there. Yes, please, I need them in my life at any means necessary, and I just want to get to know them. So that's where that comes from. So then you have your assigned sex. That's just some stuff that a doctor said when you were born that this is what it is. We understand that kind of doesn't really always work out into everybody's favor, and we know we got to make some changes. And then the lovely outside. So I decided this morning that I was going to put on this sweater vest and this shirt because I want to look cute for this training. That's my expression. That's how I express myself to the world. I put on these glasses, I put on these shoes, and that is my expression. This is who, what people see is the first impression of us. And in order for us to be comfortable in our skin, all of these have to match up. My identity, my attraction, and my sex all have to line up with my expression to create this happy, healthy individual that can, change the world moving forward. So that's why I like to introduce the genderbread person, because it's a fun activity to do to explain kind of like all the ins and outs of being a queer individual. Because like I said earlier in this statement, it takes a lot of self-discovery, and self-discovery is hard. I will question and ask you, when is the last time you've kind of taken a look at yourself? So let's do a fun little activity. So like I said in the previous slide, have you checked in with yourself? Have you did a scan, figured out where you're at? Well, we're gonna do that right now. It's gonna be a quick one because, I wanna get through this training. I don't wanna keep you forever. So we're just gonna do a quick little exercise together. So if you will, take out the handout that was provided, or if you wanna write this down, whichever one, pause this video, or you can sit here, watch me do a little dance, and then we're gonna kind of get into it. So the first one we're gonna talk about is gender identity. So gender identity, how do you identify? Is it that top line where it's man, masculine energy? Is it that bottom line that's female, female energy? Are you consider each one of those as 0 to 100. Are you 100% one or the other? 50-50? 80-20? 70-30? Where do you find yourself? So take a moment, kind of do a check-in, close your eyes. Just kind of figure out, where's my identity? Now, if you're having a crisis, you can also call me for that too. I am a therapist, so if you're having a little bit of an identity crisis, come talk to me, we can talk it through. The next one is gender expression. So this is how we express ourselves. That's how, like I said earlier, this morning I decided to wear this because I wanted to dress up for you all. I wanted to be all cute. How do you express yourself? And this changes day to day. So I'm asking for right now. How is your gender expression rated? Is it that man, male figure, masculine energy? Is it that female, feminine energy? Which one is it? And once again, 100% one or the other? 80-20? 70-30? How are you identifying today? Not identifying, expressing today. Let me use the words correctly if I'm actually going to tell you how to do it. And the next one is atomical sex. This is, what your sex is. Which nobody should be asking what's in your pants in this day and age. And we shouldn't be asking anybody else what's in their pants. Unless it's consensual and it's for sexual purposes. Which we're going to talk about now. So sexual attraction. So these two is where I kind of want to talk about how everybody is a little bit queer and how I think everybody should be a part of the queer community. So sexual attraction. Obviously this is who are you sexually attracted to? Like, who do you want to take to bed with you in a consensual manner that everybody is on board with? Are you 100% looking for that male masculine energy? Are you 100% looking for that female feminine energy? Or are you, 50-50, 80-20, 70-30? And trust me, if you're like, why are you giving me so many numbers for my attraction? Because there are a ton of different ways people are attracted to people in a sexual manner. Just kind of depends on where you fall. Pansexual, bisexual, homosexual, like all the things. So that's where your sexual attraction comes from. So, now, the big reason I think everybody is queer is we come down to romantic attraction. Romantic and sexual attraction are two different things. So sexual attraction, like I said previously, that's who you want to take to bed. Romantic attraction, that's who you're drawn to. So if you want to think about it as your best friends. I love my best friends. I tell them that all the time. I make it uncomfortable. I make it weird. That's an attraction. Something attracted me to them. Do I want to take them to bed? No. Some of them, maybe. Only consensually, of course. But that attraction is what brought them to our life. So once again, measure yourself. Look at your friend group. Look at the people that you're like, this person is such an energy that I want them in my life. That is an attraction. And that is why everybody's a little bit queer, because something had to attract you to all the people in your life. They didn't just show up and you're just like, okay, fine. Join me for the ride. Like, you want them in your life because they bring something to it. And you bring something to theirs. That's an attraction too. So rate yourself. Where's your attraction at? Do you have only male masculine energy friends? Do you have only female feminine energy friends? Or is it that, fun flow in the middle? 80-20, 70-30, 50-50? Who knows? So that's kind of like just a quick fun check-in to do with ourselves, to be like, oh yeah, what am I? Who am I? Because we're always growing, we're always learning. That's why you're here. That's why I try and learn as much as I can. So, thanks for doing this check-in with me. Thank you all so much for sticking with me. I am so thankful that you're here, creating these affirming spaces. So part of that is pronouns. We have heard so much about pronouns recently. The good, the bad, the ugly, all the things that are said about it. But at the end of the day, they're important, they're needed, and we need to understand them. So the biggest thing we need to understand about pronouns is they are attached to someone's identity. Just like we talked about earlier, when we're doing those self-check-ins, figuring out who we are, that's what we've done with our pronouns too. Individuals that use pronouns outside of the he, she series that we've been accustomed to, they've had to understand their identity. They've had to take that deep dive look and understand that he doesn't really work for me. So for me, I use he, they pronouns like I introduced in the beginning. Sometimes I do just kind of feel outside that gender binary because, I definitely don't do a lot of things that are masculine presenting. But like I said earlier, when it comes to clothing, why are we identifying things by their gender roles? Can't things just be things? With that is why can't pronouns just be pronouns? So the big thing is to just understand people's pronouns. Understand them, learn them, and just know that it is okay to mess up. We understand as individuals who use pronouns outside of what society has told us that people are going to mess up. We're only human, and we need to give people grace to mess up. But we as people who are messing up need to understand that we got to learn. We got to understand. And so we're going to kind of take a quick walk in this next slide through some of our, pronouns that we've used growing up. And some of those neo-pronouns that we've kind of seen grow in popularity over the last years as people are identifying themselves, they're, attaching to their higher self. So we're going to kind of talk about those. So let's get this going. So now we're just going to go through some pronouns. So as you'll see on this sheet, we've got a ton of pronouns. So those first top two are the gendered ones that we have grown up with. That's what people use. And then you'll see on the bottom half, there's the gender neutral ones, which we have also grown up with and have been generally used. These gender neutral pronouns have been around for a long, long time. So the first one's, gendered pronouns. He, she. That's what we've grown up with. That's what we've been told is what we need to use. But we understand that we don't like to do what we're told. And people can identify as so many more. So we have the singular they. They, them, and theirs. That's how people can be identified. And then we'll get into those neopronouns. So these neopronouns are third person personal pronouns. They've also been around for a long time. Some of these have been dated back to the 1800s, the early 1900s. I can bore you on the history of pronouns, but I just want you to understand that we need to understand them in order to use them, in order to make our brain remember that not everybody is he, she. There can be so many identifiers out there. Some of the more commonly used neopronouns are the ze, here, and heres, the ze, there, and theirs, and the ze, there, and theirs. Which I know the last two sound very familiar, but you can see that the spellings are different. So when in doubt, just kind of look it up. If you see something, understand it. And the basic thing to know is pronouns, we use them. They're attached to people's identity, like I said before. So we need to understand them. And this is your moment to learn and grow with me and learn a little bit about pronouns that you may not have known. So there's been so much. We've learned so much, we've grown so much, and I hope you use this this time that if you had an opinion, you open it up to change your mind. So with that, I just kind of want to take a quick break and just let you know that when in doubt, just ask. Ask for a person's pronouns. Ask how they want to be referred to. Ask how you identify them. Because if you're going out, identifying someone in a way that they don't want to be identified, you could be opening them up to danger, or you could be offending them and hurting their, ego. We know we don't like a bruised ego. And a big thing, this whole when in doubt, not only ask, but, just kind of change the way we talk about things. We don't have to gender everything. I know a lot of dudes like to name their truck something and she's real pretty with whatever. Okay, I'm not going to even try to subject people to the things that they like, but we don't have to gender a truck. I gender the moon all the time, so I am just as guilty. But there are some things that we don't have to gender. And there's a lot of things we don't have to assume. And the best way to overcome assuming so it doesn't make a fool out of either one of us is just asking. So how do we create these affirming and inclusive spaces that, we've worked so hard to create? That's why you're here. You want to be that affirming and inclusive space. Well, there's many ways. There's many different things that we can do to create those spaces. And this is the first step. And actually, you might have already taken this step. This is just a requirement to be on our Pride Guide, so that's why you're here. And, we're glad you're here, but maybe we're going to give you some tools on how to create those affirming spaces. So if you'll walk with me to the next slide, I'll go over some of those ways we can do it. So back to creating those affirming and inclusive spaces. A lot of that comes from people's first impressions. When I walk into a place, I want to feel welcome. I want to feel like I'm seen. So how can we do that? As a business or an organization, how can we make sure that our employees, our customers, our clients, our participants, our patients, whatever you identify as within the work culture or the subculture or whatever culture you have, how do we make sure we're creating these spaces? So when it comes to the hiring process, are you stating your pronouns? Are you asking for your hirees' pronouns? Are you understanding who they are as an individual? Are your policies that you have, are they gender neutral? I know a lot of things come through in the policy around how we dress at our jobs. Some outdated policies have, women can wear fingernail polish, but say nothing about men. First off, why do we have men and women defined dress code policies? Maybe they can just be a dress code policy, ready for anybody. Because I know there's some things that I want to wear that could be women clothing or women identified stuff, but I don't identify as a woman. Or woman, excuse me, let me use the proper word for it. So why are we making policies break out into stuff like this? You can just create a general policy. Are you using partner? instead of wife or husband, because not everybody has a wife or husband. Significant other, like, are we talking and using these words that create that affirming and inclusive space? Is our client paperwork? I know some of us, there is a wall of paperwork that comes to the client before they ever come and see us in person. Like, I am a therapist. There's a wall of paperwork that a client has to fill out before they even see me. But that paperwork is also my chance to understand who I'm seeing. What is their preferred name? Like, what are their preferred pronouns? How am I going to identify this person as soon as they walk in? So that first meeting is, hi, so-and-so. Thank you so much for coming to see me. My name is Gage Williams. My pronouns are he, they. These are my credentials. This is why you can come see me. So does your paperwork, not that, because you're not going to understand what I'm saying, does your paperwork also identify you as an affirming and inclusive space? And I'm not saying you can't ask for, their birth name, because sometimes you need the birth name for insurance purposes, for billing, for all that stuff. And individuals understand that. Like, my real name isn't Gage. Like, so that obviously is not going to be attached to everything. That's my preferred name. That's what I want people to call me. And then the overall feel. Like, am I going to walk in and just understand it? Like, oh, this is a space for me. This is a space where I can be comfortable. I can laugh. I can be myself, because I don't want to put a mask on. I've worn a mask for too many years. And a lot of queer people in Casper, in Wyoming, in the world wear a mask. We don't want people to wear masks. We want people to be their authentic selves, because when they're their authentic selves, that's when their smile shines the brightest. And we all know that we can use a little more smiles in this world. You will see that I did give you a little bit of a cheat sheet in those resources. So it kind of just talks about, how do we make our policies gender neutral? What do we need to look out for? And the biggest thing is, what's the setup? Is there a bathroom for anyone to use? I know a lot of individuals who don't go to places because they don't know the bathroom situation. Could you imagine having to go somewhere where you were like, I don't know if I have to go to the bathroom, if I can? So, does your space offer that welcome and inclusive feel that people, no matter what, they don't even have to think about it? So I'm asking you to think about it. So I'm assuming you've probably come up with your own questions that I don't know if I've answered them. I hope I have answered them. If I haven't answered them, I'm going to reiterate this probably 100,000 more times, even though we are very close to the ending. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions. But in my trainings, these are the ones that have kind of come up the most. So I kind of want to talk about them because I do feel they're important, because I think all of us are affected by them at some points. So the first one, what happens if I mess up? What happens if you get somebody's pronouns wrong? What happens if you get their preferred name wrong? Understand that you need to give yourself the grace to mess up. But you also need to give yourself a little push to stop messing up. This is why we learn. This is why we grow. I can tell you right now, I've messed up. I still mess up, but I'm a human at the end of the day. So I'm going to give myself the grace, and I ask my community to give me that grace as well. We know when it's being used for malicious intent. So if you mess up, just understand, let's rectify it, let's move on, and let's keep going. Why is the queer community so confusing? Well, as we've looked at your identity, as we've kind of digested a little bit about my identity is confusing. And so when you fall out of that straight cisgender, the two things that you can be, or we were told we could be, there's a lot of other things you can be. So that's where the confusing comes from. But at the end of the day, it's not really confusing. It's just there's a lot of information. Do you need all that information? Probably not. Is it fun to have and to look at? Yeah. I love learning about the queer community. I mean, obviously I do. I would not be talking about all this stuff with you. So how can you be a good ally? You be a good ally by doing this stuff. All the things that I've said throughout this training. Learn, grow, expand your knowledge. Make sure your spaces and the spaces that you occupy are affirming, they're inclusive. Make sure that you are going out there and being the best support system. and really standing up. Like, we don't need passive allies. I don't want allies that just show up to Pride events. I want allies that 365 days a year are out there advocating for us, advocating for the rights of trans individuals, of queer individuals, because we are in a state that does a lot of negative stuff. So we need our allies outside of Pride, outside of the events that we do. You need to be unapologetically an ally, and you need to be loud about it, because I like to be loud about it. Man, that's how we're going to change the world, is through all of this. And the last one, how do I combat negative assumptions of the queer community? It's with this knowledge, because knowledge is power. We can be told one thing and it could come from this very negative source, and we know, there are some arguments out there that are just not based on fact. They're based off of a book, a story that was told. They're based off of stuff that just kind of puts a little bit of that fear-mongering out there that people so love to use against the queer community. So the way to do it is to fight back, is to educate, is to knowledge, is to come at it from a fact-based society and kind of take those emotions away. And just understand that, I'm not going to get angry about this, but I'm going to tell you the facts. And I'm not telling you to go, find an argument, but if you find yourself in a situation where you need to talk about it, come at it with facts. Change those assumptions. Tell them, that's not how it is. You have been told something that is a lie. It's just using your knowledge. It's using your power as an ally. So we did it. We're at the end. We're here. We're just going to do a quick recap and just talk about the little things. So with those affirming spaces, with creating affirming places to be, with showing that you're an affirming person, it's the little things. So as you'll see in my title, I have my pronouns. I have who I am. I have all the identifying information you can get about me. But we should expand that. Is your email signature telling everything about you? Is the little Zoom name box telling everything about you? Any place where you can, use your pronouns, use your identity. Is it stating who you are? I don't like the word normal, but in order to change people's perceptions and the whole, why are we talking about pronouns so much? We have to normalize it. Like I said, I don't like the word normal because that should only be a setting on a dryer, but we have to get it out there. We have to show. So it is the little things. Show your identity. And spread it out far and wide. And then with that, you can ask other people their identities. So it's the little things. It's asking too. So for me, I run groups. I run trainings. I run this. I run that. I always ask pronouns because I just want people to understand that they're there and we need to talk about them. So, it's the little things. So yeah, let's go over a quick recap. First off, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for sitting here with me, for learning with me, for growing with me. And we learned so much. We learned that the queer community has so many different words attached to it. You have a whole document based off all the words. And then we learned pronouns. What are the differences? Why is this one that way? Where have they come from? And we've learned how to create our affirming spaces. We have learned so much. And once again, for me and Casper Pride and the queer community as a whole, we want to thank you for being here because with you here, we are creating those affirming spaces and we are expanding access for the queer community, which they have so desperately needed. So from the bottom of my entity, thank you so much. And like always, if you have any questions, please reach out. My email is in all the resources. With all the other resources that are there, there's a ton of other information that I've provided. So just, get out there, learn, grow, and thank you again. I'm going to say it another time for creating these affirming spaces. Keep it queer, friends.